So good afternoon everyone, and a warm welcome to our Contact in Housing webinar for housing associations. My name is George Patterson and I'm the head of the comms division within the KIT group, and I'm joined today by Ed Killick, who is one of Gamma's contact solution experts, and Ed will shortly deliver his presentation. KIT are a Gamma Gold partner in the UK, and we've worked with Gamma for many years now. I think going on 15 years or so. So something to note today is that although the webinar is around the contact platform, that's only part of the services that the comms division can deliver to our clients. We provide services from, connectivity, so simple broadband connections, leased lines, MPLS networks, SIP and cloud-based telephone systems, as well as sort of solutions, mobile solutions from the sort of 4 large mobile networks. So obviously, just kind of off-piece, obviously due to the PSTN switch-off in the near future, we'd be delighted to speak to you around any requirements or changes sort of being enforced on you due to the changes in the industry. So today's presentation is based around the omni-channel contact platform, the sort of technology and how this can provide a more efficient way of working for your organisation, and ultimately a better experience for your sort of staff and your clients ultimately. We'll have a chat around the functionality and the flexibility of the platform, with the benefits that sort of browser-based solutions using sort of WebRTC technology can offer, allowing, for example, staff to work remotely with no impact on your sort of business operations. And I guess ultimately we would welcome the opportunity to have a more in-depth chat with you around your current setup and the plans you've got moving forward. We'll have a short Q&A at the end, so if you just pop any questions onto the platform, we'll try to address them potentially as we go, and if we run out of time, we'll certainly get back to you with answers to any questions. So without further ado, I'll now hand you over to Ed, who will talk you through the platform and the benefits it offers organisations looking to offer customers better service to their clients.
Thank you very much, George. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And thank you all for giving us your time this afternoon. Truly is appreciated. It won't take you much longer than the sort of allotted time here, so we'll get you well on your way, and hopefully with a bit of knowledge to boot. So to start off with, as George has mentioned there, I work for Gamma and we are the vendor behind this solution. However, KIT have significant sort of expertise in bringing it to you, the end users or the customers, and that's really where they start to add their value within the equation. But understanding contact and housing, what I thought we would do is take a look at how businesses in general are communicating, how customers are communicating with those businesses, and sort of understanding some of the trends that the market is going through. Now, we will then sort of go through to more specific housing association related sort of environments or maybe challenges that are faced by your typical housing association, and some of the housing associations that are currently using this platform, what we've seen them deliver from the product, and some of the benefits that that's brought to them as well. So just speaking in general here, and the way that we communicate with businesses, and if you think of yourself as a consumer, and specifically with sort of the trends that we've seen over the last few years, the challenges that we've seen, the pandemic being a sort of a revolutionary challenge in how businesses started to communicate. We started to see the omni-channel, and just for clarity, I'll define what we define that as is basically, the capability to use multiple different methods of communication, but deliver it into a single platform. So your agents, your colleagues, your teams can actually, manage those interactions, those channels effectively. We've started to see that type of communication really become more and more prevalent. And in a couple of slides, we'll go through, a general trend and what we're seeing in the UK as a whole. So, to start off with the first bubble there, I would very much class myself within this in terms of a consumer, but 70% of customers use more than 3 channels to communicate with businesses. Myself personally, I think the top 3 that I would use would be voice, email, and web chat. But depending on the nature of your business, depending on the nature of your customers, there could be some other channels in there, such as social media, that might feed into that and start to inform how businesses are communicating with it. But what we're looking at here, and just before I sort of move on to the next point, it's very, very evident that the way that a lot of people communicate with businesses is changing and will continue to change. So it's important that as an organization, you have the capability to communicate with your customers in a manner, in a medium that suits them and allows them to really feel comfortable. And ultimately, as we can see from the second model there, 80% of consumers consider the customer experience to be as important as all the product and or services that organization provides. And again, we see this, we probably as consumers are more demanding than we ever really have been. And it's important to understand that, organizations probably have increased pressures on them because of that increase in demand. So, again, providing technology that helps you to alleviate some of those challenges and provide that ultimately, provide that better customer experience is really, really important. And then the last one that I'll sort of mention within this slide here is the likes of web chat. So, web chat is one that I personally am a massive fan of, and it's one that we've seen across the platform, especially deployed in the housing market, deployed quite effectively. Because while, and I'll call it out now, the platform doesn't have any sort of AI or chatbot capabilities built into it, what you can do is start to build a sequence, a flow, if you will, where a lot of the sort of menial tasks are dealt with without human interaction, and obviously that brings massive benefits to you in terms of the staffing levels, in terms of the pressures put on those individuals in the teams answering these questions, but also in terms of speed of response to your customers if they're being diverted off to a portal where they can manage a lot of this stuff, or this sort of a frequently asked questions page that's popped to them, or there's just an interaction that can start to sort of change how they're driven into your business based on some of the answers that they've had. It can really be quite an efficient tool and quite an effective tool in helping you to streamline those interactions. So, web chat is absolutely an unsung hero, and one that is, as I mentioned, being successfully deployed, but there is always sort of room for more services to be sort of taken out on the back of that as well. If we look at the sort of the UK market as a whole, and this isn't Gamma data, this is from a third party, from Contact Babel, and we look at sort of some of the trends that we've seen over the last, the decade and further. If we start to look at what's happening there, if we take the blue to represent the percentage of interactions that are happening over voice. So if we look right back to 2006, and I think it will be no surprise to everyone on the call that voice was well and truly the forefront of how people communicated with businesses in general, and over time that has declined and is sort of steadily declining until we get to about here, and there's some interesting stats that actually came around sort of at the back of the pandemic, which I'll talk through but not flash up on screen. But one thing that is still very, very evident is that the way that people prefer to communicate with businesses is via voice. That is still the major channel, and that can be due to a variety of different reasons. It could be that your customers, your tenants, they may be of a certain demographic where that is the natural way for them to communicate. Or it could just be a preference in terms of the interactions. If we think of factors, again, putting our consumer hats back on, factors that maybe annoy us in terms of experiences we've had with businesses ourselves, one of the things that can be incredibly frustrating to individuals, especially when using digital channels, is they feel as if they're not getting maybe the response they want out of that platform, or they feel as if their query doesn't fit into the box that maybe a web chat journey or an email journey sort of provides them. So having that interaction with an individual is really, really important to helping get that query resolved or that issue resolved as quick as possible. And one thing that is sort of ubiquitous across the piece in terms of the channels is that people are very sort of sensitive about how their time is spent. So making sure that we can make those journeys as streamlined as possible for them, regardless of what channel they are using, is sort of really, really important. And naturally that brings benefits to you as an organization as well. Interestingly, around voice as well. So we saw, as you can see here on the graph, quite a severe decline represented by this sort of blue line moving down there, and then it sort of plateaued at roughly about 63%. And that trend, actually, if we were to sort of carry this on from some of the data that we've been shown recently, that trend isn't forecast to keep declining. It's actually, in certain industries, it's actually increasing in terms of the number of interactions that are held via voice. And there's, again, reasoning behind that. And a lot of it stems to that speed of response, or the type of question or the nature of that business that is dealing with there. So, it's an important factor, and it's something that we absolutely need to still class as a key method of communication within sort of the overall customer environment there as well. Second thing to talk about is web chat. And again, if we look at web chat, which is represented by this gray line here, been around for a number of years. And again, from personal experience, I've seen really, really good examples of how web chat has been deployed. But I've also seen really poor examples where, it's almost hindered the experience that I've had when interacting with a business. So I think that's one thing that's fundamental, and this is something that Kit can absolutely help you through, whether it be scoping or just sort of technical consultancy, is making sure that journey will deliver what you want in terms of your desired outcomes, but also the actual uptake in the technology. And again, once we go through some of the features and the benefits of the contact center, but obviously being an omnichannel contact center, you can report on those web chat interactions in the same way you would for a voice service as well. So you've got a nice centralized platform spitting out all your management information to help you identify trends, help you identify the types of queries coming into your organization, and ultimately allowing you to make business decisions on the back of that as well. Generally speaking, to web chat, the trend is that it is increasing. So if we look at the two grey lines here, those are getting wider, and the sort of percentage is absolutely increasing as time is going on, and that is forecast to keep going. Those stats that I showed you a second ago, about 79% of people prefer to communicate via web chat when given the choice between web chat and voice is really, really essential. So that's one thing that later on in the presentation today, I'll show you an example of how the platform works and a journey that a customer could potentially take when coming into a housing association there. Lastly is sort of social media that I want to touch on as well, and that is represented by the blue line here as well, and that is forecast to keep on growing. We would class WhatsApp conversations as part of the social media sort of trend in there as well, and that's become more prevalent, especially in the business environment, as a way of communicating as well. So it's really important that when you're maybe considering what your next communication platform looks like, all of these views are considered. That it might not be something that you presently work across at the moment. However, moving forward with the trends that we are sort of anticipating in the marketplace as a whole, that your platform does consider all of these factors, and again, we'll talk about things like integration later on in the presentation, but making sure that the technology is going to be sound and fit for purpose throughout the sort of the decade of that at least that contract, but also the future of what that cycle might look like for yourselves. Specifically focusing on contact center from contact centers in housing, and typically the size of the deployment. So again, this is from that Contact Babel report, and what we'll see here is the contact center sort of demographic in the housing association is that the majority are made up by sort of contact centers which are between 10 to 250 people in size, and the absolute majority within that is 10 to 50 agent positions, and this might ring true of your organization on the call. And one of the challenges that we've seen across this area of the market is that a lot of the capability that we've mentioned, a lot of the functionality that is associated with these products is typically more aligned at your higher end, maybe your 250 plus agent positions, and unfortunately comes with a price point that is sort of aligned with that as well. So making sure that this technology is accessible, so it doesn't break the bank for yourselves, but also you can realize some of those benefits regardless of the size of your quote unquote contact center. And some of you may be on this call and you might not even have a recognized contact center. You may have a team that deals with the inbound sort of tenant queries or whatever it might be. And that's all right too, because the platform that we're talking about today is absolutely designed to be flexible and be scalable. It's all built across sort of multiple data centers in the UK, but it is a true cloud consumption model, which will enable you to achieve some sort of flexibility gains. And as George mentioned right at the top there, it's deployed in a sort of via WebRTC is the principal method of consuming this. So it allows, again, if you've got sort of different ways of working or changes in habits as to how you have been working historically, or you allow hybrid working, flexibility, whatever it might be, it's very much aligned to meeting those current demands, as any system that you consider should be as well. Moving on to some of the challenges that we typically see, and these are from real life users that we've either talked to where they've ended up adopting the platform, or just conversations with the likes of people who are experts in this area of the market. But some of the typical challenges that we're hearing as a way to sort of differentiate between the experience both internally and externally. So these are some of the scenarios that we've come up with there on the back of that. But if you were speaking to a tenant, and the first one is there is, I'm a vulnerable tenant and I would like my call answered by an agent as quickly as possible. The traditional method of treating everyone the same when they call into your contact center doesn't really fit the bill for that. And obviously there's some quite serious repercussions for especially vulnerable people by not distinguishing them and treating them with maybe the severity that their situation demands, or whatever it might be. But with the platform that we're talking about today, one of the key bits of capability is that you can, based on a number of who's calling your contact center, you can make a routing decision as to how you want that individual to be handled. If it isn't a vulnerable person and you want them to actually go into the normal flow and go through the steps, whether that be maybe an IVR, which is press 1 for this, press 2 for that, and go into various teams and be dealt with in a BAU manner, you can do. But if you need to highlight and identify certain individuals where, if I were to call in and I was vulnerable, you could route me directly to a specific team maybe who handles my inquiries, or put me at the front of the queue, and there's sort of mechanisms within the platform that can allow you to do that. So I'll talk about what that functionality is and put you a list of it in a second. But yeah, that's one of the key things that we see other housing associations who are using this platform use. Second point there, as a tenant, if queue times are longer than expected, I want to be able to request a callback rather than hold. So I think callback is a bit of capability that the sort of the market as a whole is really embracing, and for good reason. It helps to alleviate a lot of the challenges that people face. And if I was to reference back to that Contact Babel report, across any demographic, across sort of any organization that someone's dealing with, when people are using voice as a channel, the two things that are most important to them are that they don't want to be waiting a long time, and once they've got through to an individual, they want their call to be handled by the first individual, so first call resolution or first contact resolution. So embedding software that allows you to do so and enables things like a callback, which can help to alleviate a lot of the pain that people feel, is really, really important. And this can be run in two different ways on the platform. So typically why you will see a large queue within your organization is maybe a bit of a bottleneck in terms of the resource that's answering those calls internally. So you've maybe got more calls than people answering them, naturally builds up a queue. And by introducing the first callback that I'll describe here, that might not necessarily alleviate that problem, but what it does do is provide a much nicer customer experience on the back of it. So first way that we can initiate callback in this platform is by, if you were to call into the organization, and you can set the parameters as to when you want to offer that. That could be a time-based parameter, or that could be a position in queue parameter. So you don't want anyone below 10 to be offered a callback, but if an 11th caller called in, and that person would then be offered a callback. And what it looks like from a user experience would be a case of, thank you for calling Ed's Housing Association. You can see I'm a very creative individual there. Presently busy at the moment. However, if you'd like us to call you back, press 1. I press 1 as the caller. I can then hang up my phone. It will keep my position in the queue and deliver me, sort of move me down the call. And when it gets to the head of the queue, delivers me to the agent. The agent doesn't have to press any buttons to sort of ring me back. All they have to do is answer that inbound call, and then the platform will automatically call me back. And you can set a variety of different retries, etc. there as well. What we can also do is initiate things like callback slots. So if you know that having that callback as I've described it there isn't going to help to alleviate the wait times that your people are facing. What you could do is, start to identify whether that callback is urgent or not. And if it's not an urgent callback, you could actually maybe offer a callback at a different time or date when you know that you're actually not particularly busy from an inbound perspective. And what it does in terms of your workload for the staff and your teams is it stops those big spikes and those big peaks and troughs in terms of activity, but levels it out and ultimately positively impacts on the customer experience as well, because they know that, right, I'm not waiting 40 minutes today, but I know I'm going to get a call back Wednesday morning first thing. So, some really great bits of capability in there. And again, historically, feature set that was maybe reserved for contact centers aimed at the upper echelons in this area of the market as well. I'm going to sort of skip the next one, but I've talked about this one in terms of the multi-channel and omni-channel capabilities, but one bit of capability, and again for continuity, for providing a better bit of experience, a better customer experience rather. The final point there, I would like to speak to the person I last spoke to when I called back in. And again, there is capability within the platform. If you had a conversation with an individual who's familiar with your situation as a tenant, and that person is available, you can, whether you choose to turn it off or on is up to you, initiate something in the platform, which would basically, if I call back in and I spoke to George, next time I call in, I could just go straight through to George if he's available. And if he's not available, I just fit into the queue and I can keep, following the BAU process there as well. So from a tenant, there's little nuggets there, little snippets that are being used particularly well in sort of the existing customer base that's out there. But obviously from your side, as a sort of, some of the capability that you're probably typically going to see is we would like to look at, how agents or supervisors are handling this. And, one thing that's going to be crucial to any organization, regardless of how they work or what the sector they work in, is going to be adoption of the technology, right? If you guys are adopting technology that's using technology that's not really well adopted, a lot of the challenges that was maybe put in place to solve won't be alleviated in the best way. So making sure that the software is as easy, as intuitive to use for the user of the software is also paramount in how we deliver the service as well. So to that first point there, as a supervisor, I want to decide what callback slots are offered to callers so we can maximize agent availability for inbound activity. Going back to a point I sort of referenced there as well, but when we use the callback slots, you can choose what time slots you want those callback slots to be offered in, and they could be based on when you're not busy from an inbound perspective. So if we're absolutely hammered first thing on a Monday morning from an inbound perspective, maybe you want to drive some of that non-crucial traffic to another time, and as I've already mentioned, that would sort of provide efficiencies and sort of in terms of the workload handled by those individuals as well. There are capabilities such as pause and resume when it comes to the call recording as well, but there's also sort of in CRM integration, and we'll do a slide on this later on just to sort of speak of some that are specific to obviously the vertical in which you all operate, but also from a supervisor capability and from a sort of, an agent welfare capability, should we put it that way as well. There is the capability to mark interactions as abusive within the platform. If there is something that needs to be tagged as a sort of an ad hoc call recording, if you will. So if there was a conversation that was had and it didn't start off being aggressive but turned aggressive and I needed to flag it for whatever reason, there is capability to do that from within the platform as well. We've only touched on a handful of features here, but these are what the features are called. So if there's any of those that you would like to know more about, speak to George and everyone over at Kik, and these are some of the sort of the bits of functionality that we've mentioned. We obviously talked about different channels and the capability to have different conversations on there. There is an SMS capability in this platform as well. At present, it's outbound only. However, it's used for things like appointment confirmation, and I'll show you a journey in a second as to how an individual may interact with a repair line on a housing association, and we can sort of talk through how the use case of SMS might be used in there as well. Excuse me while I just have a quick sip of water. Right, apologies on there. So to summarize some of the functionality, the feature set of this, I would break it down into these very, very simple bubbles. But there is a choice of channel in terms of how your customers, your tenants can contact you. Those channels include things like email, web chat, and then there's the outbound SMS that I mentioned there as well. Within queue, I talked to some of them, such as callback, but there is call management capability. There's a significant queuing capacity on this platform. sort of native to it as well. But there's also various other elements that I haven't mentioned, but one that might be relevant to yourself is that you can turn on a setting in the platform if a tenant called in on a Monday and they waited 15 minutes on that call. What you could look to do is to improve their next interaction with you is actually next time they call in, you can give them priority in a specific queue, so they get bumped up the queue. Maybe they only wait 5 minutes in the second call, and obviously their perception, their whole demeanor will change. And obviously if you're not dealing with an irate tenant, irate customer, that probably makes for a much nicer experience for the agent, the individual handling said call. So using technology to try and again affect sort of business outcomes or how you run is really the name of the game with this business software. Excuse me, skills-based routing is absolutely the default way of routing in this platform as well. So making sure that your best individuals, your most capable individuals, are speaking to tenants about whatever that agent's skill set might be. Or you could also sort of use it for training purposes. What we've seen used quite effectively is where maybe you don't want your best people speaking to it, you want maybe more junior agents to be exposed to certain interactions, whatever queue that might come on through. You could actually put them as priority. They're forced to then deal with more interactions, and as such, it speeds up that whole training purpose. That training journey, that whole training piece there. So it's clever ways of using technology, but if you want everyone to sort of change the way that they're sort of routing calls, there is simultaneous ring within the platform. There is also longest idle if that's how you'd prefer to work as well, and get an even distribution around a team. But a choice of routing, but skills-based routing is the one that we typically tend to see, which represents the biggest gains for organizations there as well. And then lastly, in terms of sort of reporting and getting management information out of the platform, there is a comprehensive reporting suite built into this platform natively. We are in the process of releasing webhooks into sort of a BI type platform, so that might be Power BI or Tableau or whatever other software that might be out there. So in our sort of one of our next releases, we'll be able to put live data into those engines, and you'll be able to again essentially build custom reporting data sets that might fall in line with a variety of other metrics that you're recording elsewhere, but also allow you to really get into the nuts and bolts of what's happening and really understand the data as to why people are calling into your organization, what are those queries regarding, and is there something we can do to the process, is there something to do with how that flow is built that we could make better essentially. So loads and loads of data coming out of the platform, and it's your choice as to how you choose to consume that. So I've mentioned about quite a bit of the feature set of this platform, and again the idea of today is just to give you a bit of a teaser as to what it could potentially do. But by all means, if you want a deeper dive session, the guys at Kik and George would absolutely welcome the opportunity to sort of talk in more detail about it. But what I'll do now is I'll sort of show you through an interaction, and the situation that we're looking at here is how an agent would potentially handle an interaction that's come in through a repair line, and what the system would look like for that particular agent as well. So I'm going to try and talk over a video here, so apologies if there's a lot clicking going on in the background and it's moving around, but I think this is the best way to show you via a real interaction without doing it real time, because obviously we've got platform clashes and things like that. So first thing that I mentioned earlier is around the platform being browser based. So you just log on to a URL there, and upon reaching that URL, you put your username and passwords to go into the platform. I've talked a lot about this being browser based. However, there is still the choice, if there is a preference within your organization, to push the voice path to a physical handset. So you could choose that this is pushed to a number, or you could just use it entirely via a browser by selecting that option that you see on screen there as well. Once signed into the platform, this is the view that will greet the agent, and they will have some controls up in the top right hand corner, as well as a sort of centralized view showing them interactions as to the different channels that they are assigned across. So we've got voice, email, and web chat there as well, and it's got some information specific to that individual around how they are performing against either set KPIs in the platform or generally in terms of interactions that they've handled as well. In the center pane there, you've got an activity
pane just showing them the last sort of calls that they've handled either from an inbound perspective, and it does have click to dial as well capability from there as well. So I'm just going to filter down to show you missed calls only, so I can start to see what they look like. I can see the queue from which they came, or I could filter it down to show all activity across the piece there. In the bottom left hand corner, we've got a series of widgets which allow you to see what's going on around you. So regardless of where I'm working, I can see that there's a call in the queue there. So it's changed color, all those different queues, circles or queues that I'm across, and you have the same for email and web chat as well. To make myself available, and a call will be pushed into me. There we are. So what the agent can see there is they can see a variety of sort of information at the top of the screen, and they can see the number of the individual calling. They can see the type of call, so that in this case it's an inbound call, but it could be an outbound, it could be a callback, just so they're briefed. And they can also see how long that individual has waited in the queue to prepare them for maybe the conversation that's coming next as well. Upon answering the conversation, you'll see in the center of the screen that I have a bit of information as to scripting. So again, can be turned off or on. In this case here, what we're going to do is I'm speaking to someone about a repair. So the first step is asking them what their name is. And what you see there is I've captured their name, and it's asking me the next step is it shown in the internal CRM? So there is an internal CRM here, which I've just clicked on. I've matched the contact to there. You can do sort of free text box down the bottom. And you can also see the historical information as to how that individual has dealt with your organization previously. So you can start to build context behind the current interaction that you're dealing with as well. Second step is to obviously ask the tenants can confirm what requires a repair in the property. In this case, it's a toilet, bath or sink. And again, these different options are entirely customizable. You can choose whether it's a drop down, whether it's free text, whatever it might be. In this case, it's a leak under the shower. So the individual has identified what the repair is that it needs doing, and there is a centralized sort of database here between the back office system, so the PBX, and the contact center as well. So I've just typed in plumber repair there, put the individual on hold, and I could go and call the plumber. And what we've got there is we've got a variety of different options. So while the call's being established, you'll see that it's sort of those buttons are grayed out, and once the connection is connected, you'll see that you've got a series of different arrows as well. So I've got the capability to consult with an individual. So right now I'm speaking to the client, and I can go back to speaking to the plumber just by clicking on those arrows there. So I'm now speaking to the plumber as well, put the client back on hold. If I needed to conference the two together, I can do so nice and easily there. I can drop out, or I could make a transfer and complete the call across to the customer here. So I've potentially got all the information I need out of the client and relayed that to the plumber. Plumber's happy for us to proceed to the next step, which is booking the appointment. So I can confirm that over the phone, and I could ask them whether they want an email confirmation of that. So next step is clicking on that email, choosing the confirmation template, and as you can see here, we'll just put in some information, making sure that we're sending it to the right email address there. And the template that we have selected has populated below. So I need to change a couple of bits of detail in there. And for accuracy, there is a spelling mistake there as well, a little bit of a typo. And I can put in the date of the repair, just so I've sent that out via a digital channel so they have something to reference. And what you'll see in a second as well is there's the capability to attach if there was this is what you need to be aware of prior to your repair guide or whatever it might be. I could do that. However, I've hit send and that email has gone off. I'm still on the phone with the customer. If there's any other queries that I can help them with, I shall ask him. If not, I can then classify this call or put a disposition code depending on what your sort of language is around that, and I can go into a wrap-up state. You do have the capability to extend that wrap-up state if there's sort of extensive notes that needed to be made at this stage, either in the internal CRM or another one, or I could complete that call and go back into an available state, which I shall do so now. And you see the agent's gone back into available. If there were more calls in the queue, they would start to filter through and populate to that individual. And I say calls, but it could be web chats, it could be different digital interactions such as email as well. So that's the first interaction I wanted to show you there. Obviously a sort of a focus on voice within that element. And the second interaction that I want to show you here is how that same interaction would look, but maybe with a more digital slant on it as well. So let me just fire off the video, and it's this very similar approach and a very similar scenario that we're looking through. So it's a repair chat this time rather than a repair line. So the individuals come in. This is all being pushed by the system. You know, I'm not, as an agent, having any interaction with this individual at this moment in time. Starting to ask me some of the questions that we might have gone through earlier. So again, I can start to select where that's going to. And at this stage, it's sort of asking me to confirm that. And it's only now that it's going to put it through to a large agent.
a large agent, a live agent, apologies. What you'll see on here is that it's pushed that interaction into the individual. So you can see they're actively handling a web chat rather than having to go and look for it. And you'll see that the queue has sort of identified that as well. Now that can be turned off if you would prefer that individuals go and select them. However, obviously pushing it to an individual will mean that you sort of get rid of things like cherry picking, making sure that it's a more sort of equal distribution of workload, and also great for efficiencies and making sure that interactions are dealt with as quickly as possible. So I'm just asking the individual who's on the website to identify what the issue is, and I'll just click back to the other screen in a second to show you that. And they will input that they've got a leak under the shower, under the sink, as they indicated earlier. And again, what we'll be able to do is through the same pane of glass, when I go back to the agent portal here, through the same pane of glass, I'll be able to contact the plumber. I'll be able to handle multiple different channels without having to leave the platform at all. So excuse my slow typing in this instance here, but arranging a repair. And what we'll do then is look at how we move into getting that escalated from a web chat into a voice channel. So I will speak to the plumber in a similar vein as I did before. So there's the option to put the chat on park if you want to, or you can just go down there and initiate a call. And same as before, I just have to type in plumber and it will reference the centralized database. So I don't have to go and specifically know a number or anything like that. And what we'll do is it's just establishing the call at the moment. And in a second, you will see that I will have two interactions in my inbox there. So I've got the web chat, I've got the two icon there just to let me know that I'm handling two at the same time. And I've got the call and the chat, which I can then click between the two if I needed to and go and ask further questions of the individual via the digital channel. I could put that back into the queue if I was no longer handling this chat, or I can click back onto the call and there's my scripting capability that we spoke about earlier. So if there's things that I need to prompt or ask of the plumber, I can do so in there. I mentioned obviously that we've got the capability to classify calls. All of those classification reasons are entirely up to you. They can change on a queue by queue basis. So if there's information that you need to capture for a specific queue that isn't relevant to another, you can do the same there. And you can also classify interactions such as web chat or emails as well, to make sure that you're attributing reason to those interactions as well. So even via the web chat, I could launch into an email, send that appointment confirmation. I'm not going to go through it in this journey. It's exactly the same as I showed you in the first one, but just showing you how easy it is to navigate between the different channels and associating this into the internal sort of database as well. Because we've asked for the individual's name, I can attribute to them. And next time we go into their contact record, which we're doing now, I'll be able to see how they've communicated with us. So it's writing that one in, but I can see historically there was a chat in there and I could see exactly what the questions were. So I can start to build a picture as to what that individual has sort of how that individual has dealt with us previously as well. So the confirmation email will be sent over shortly, as indicated there. And I won't do it in this particular interaction, but you'll be able to see how we classify a chat and how we are able to then provide maybe a higher level of customer experience than we would do if we were doing this across multiple different channels. If the customer does need a sort of a history of the chat, that is absolutely possible as well. So if you gave them a set of instructions that you'd like them to follow, you can push that to them in a chat, or they can save that as a sort of a text file outside of the platform as well. And that concludes that interaction as well. Just in terms of time and sort of conscious that we getting towards the end of it, I just want to talk about integration capabilities and give us some time to sort of talk around maybe some questions that have come in. So as standard, and this is sort of out the box integration, the platform will integrate into the likes of Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics and Zendesk. However, it is by no means limited to those. So when we talk about the level of integration here, what we will do is basically embed a lot of those agent controls in the chosen platform. So it might be your housing management system, which I'll talk about a couple in a second. But the agent would live and breathe within that system. So if we talk to Dynamics, we would embed the call controls and all that capability that I've shown you there within that environment. So they're never having to leave that environment to deal with those interactions. But the platform does support sort of an API which allows for the creation of bespoke integrations via web services. And again, obviously the guys over at Kik, the guys and girls over at Kik have significant experience with this and capability to try and help you build those. So, if you're using the likes of Orchid or some other, Orchard, and there some other sort of housing management platforms, by all means, if it's web-based, there is a chance that we can integrate into it. It would just be a bit of a project piece to get that integration work done. But again, something that is entirely possible. And speaking to that sort of level as well, so here are two platforms that from a phone system perspective as well, we've already got some integrations into. We haven't integrated the contact center necessarily into these, but obviously we've got a level of capability that we do from the actual PBX platform itself. So I know that these are quite prominent in the housing sector, but just to give you an idea that it can absolutely be sort of changed and be molded into allowing you to recognize some significant value out of platforms that you may already be using that may be fundamental to the journeys that you're providing or how you operate internally. So ultimately, making sure that you can see the best return on investment on all the software that you choose to use as well. That is it from me speaking. You'll probably be glad to hear that. But George, I'm just curious to see if we've got about 4 or 5 minutes for some Q&A now. Just curious to see if any questions have come into the chat, or if you haven't put any questions into chat and there's something that I've mentioned there as well, please feel free to ask it now, and we will we'll run through that. Think there's any in the chat, but one thing that maybe, just because we've got a couple of minutes at the end, obviously Microsoft Teams has been very, very prevalent in the market, and there is absolutely interoperability with Microsoft Teams on this platform as well. So if you use the likes of direct routing, as George was sort of mentioning, if there is Operator Connect, if that's sort of your chosen method of sort of voice enabling your Teams method, your Teams environment, we can work with that, and we can put the contact center not within Teams, but we can get the two to play nicely together. So again, allowing you to recognize the value out of both of those platforms if they're relevant to yourselves. I think you might be on mute, George. No. Nothing further from myself. I'll hand over to you, George. I can see your lips moving, but I can't hear you. So. No, he's not working. So.
I'm sorry. That might be me now. Yeah, you can hear me okay? Good. The controller has unmuted me. So listen, thanks very much, Ed. That was absolutely brilliant, the presentation, and I think everyone, on the webinar today can see the sort of the power of the features that Contact would offer organisations and how efficient it could make them, and ultimately the customer experience, how it will impact the customer experience. So if there's no further questions, thanks again to everyone for joining the webinar today. It really is appreciated, and I hope you did get a lot out of the session. Our sales and marketing team will be following up with a recording of the session, and at that point, with any further support we can offer, or any questions that you do have that maybe come into mind after this today, then we would be more than happy to have a chat with you. One quick question I did think about, Ed, and I hope I'm not putting you under pressure here, but on the point of the inbound routing to the agent, and keeping it at the last agent that you spoke with. If a call comes in and that particular agent is busy, obviously the caller will go into the queue, but if that agent becomes available, will the caller then route to that person?
Not at that stage, I believe.
Not at that stage, right?
It's a good question, though. It's one that I will have to come back to. See, I've put me under pressure there,
I think
George.
there's a bit of test needing on that. It was just one when you brought it up earlier. I thought, need to ask about that.
Yeah,
but no,
I think
that's really it from me. And if there's nothing further, as I say, thanks very much everyone for joining today. I hope you did get a lot out of it. And as I say, we're here to help you. Okay. Anything else from you, Ed?
nothing else from me. Just thanks again, everyone. And
Yep.
yeah, thank you for your attendance.
Thanks for joining, guys, and we'll speak to you soon. Thanks.